Is Laura Hart, and I'm here with my dear friend and dear colleague, Dr. Stephen Edwards from Columbia. How are you, Stephen?
Hello, not bad, not bad.
Great, great. So this is my heart to heart. I used to do this through the pandemic once a week, and I got a little burned out, and now I'm coming back to once a month, and I actually really love it. It's just all the logistics of setting things up in our lives can get.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Your heart really should have a rhythm.
Good point. Good point. Um, so I know Stephen because his kids came to Robofun, and I was doing an open house, and I noticed this man who was kept trying to talk to me, and I'm usually a bit like a chicken with my head cut off, doing three different things, and I'm like, Laura, go talk to that person. And then I discovered we have an awful lot in common in terms of engineering, nerdy thoughtfulness, and so. In the years that I've run RoboFun, I don't get to be a programmer in the ways that I used to when I was a computer teacher, but I do get to help kids do this. But I often rely on Stephen for ideas, impact, insights. And but both of us are like everything we say to each other, like, no, we can't talk about that because we really want to talk about it for an hour and we have to, So in this conversation today, we are going to talk about at least one conversation. We may end up having more than one about how we look at AI, how we look at it in the classroom, and what we are thinking about, because it's really the birth of something very new in education.
It's pretty remarkable, and it reminds me a little bit of the time. So before I took a vow of poverty, joined academia, I worked in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley for a while. And it was really funny. Every conversation, no matter how it started, ended up talking about stock prices and real estate. Now, things have changed a little bit, and we're in New York City now. But every conversation I have seems to end up in AI, one way or the other. So I'm expecting this sort of thing to happen anyway.
Yeah. Okay, before we jump deep into the conversation, I just want to say RoboFun offers classes, camps, private lessons, birthday parties at our amazing, beautiful new office. Now it's almost 2 years old, but it still feels new, on West End Avenue between 64th and 65th. Please stop by. Please come and get a tour. Specifically this Sunday from 2 to 4, we are running an open house. And that open house is all about what we do in summer camp. And we have week-long summer camp, and you can sign your child up for the morning, the afternoon, or both. And in between, we go to the park, which is directly across the street, and play, or diagonally across the street, if I'm being technical. And my whole goal of what I've worked on for 28 years of my life is to help kids love to learn and love to take charge of their own learning. And that's what we're trying to do. And I have to say that having the support of Stephen over the years has been really very, very special for me. So before we get into your love of learning, which we talked about a few minutes ago, how did you get to Columbia? Like, what was your journey here?
So it's really interesting. So my wife and I have been married for 27 years now. And you look at the two of us, why are they together? This is really bizarre. Well, one of the things that we have in common is something pretty unusual. We both have known since, like age 3 or 4, exactly who we were and what we wanted to be and what we wanted to do and so forth. And, unlike most people who are still, well, I kind of like this, I kind of like that or whatever. It's like, no, now it's different, right? She's an artist. I'm an electrical engineer. We can't speak the same language in the details, but at the high level, the passion is the same. Let's see. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that had alleyways with garbage cans in them. And my idea would be to walk along the alleyways and pull interesting things out of the garbage. And of course, this is not grass clippings and so forth. This is electronics. This is physical things. And to this day, I'm still doing that. And it's because I want to know, what is this? How does it work? what goes with it? I have on my nightstand a clock. Well, let's see, not exactly. So it was an alarm clock that I pulled out of the garbage sometime in the 1970s. Managed to extract the mechanical movement of it. This was one of these flip type clocks.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful things. When I was in high school, I built a case for it, installed it, and it's been sitting there for a while. Let's see, 15 years ago, the movement finally broke because they had a plastic gear. It's one of the fast ones. Like, come on.
Yeah.
And that really saddens me. And then I found another one in the garbage that fit, same movement, and it sits there to this day. My whole life has been like that. And so to give you an idea, what's this?
Circuit board?
Yeah. Okay.
Breadboard.
Very good. Yeah. But, what circuit board for what? And so I pulled this out of the trash, and Columbia's constantly trying to stop me from doing that. But it's educational. Well, what is this? Well, I start looking at this, and okay, it's a circuit board, and you can't really see here. But if you start reading the numbers on the chips and looking up the data sheets and figuring that out, and this is one of these and one of those.
So Stephen, would you call this reverse engineering?
This is absolutely reverse engineering.
Okay, keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No problem. Yeah, no, and I can look at this and figure out. Oh, yeah, this is probably early '90s laptop motherboard, or notebook motherboard, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And everything you see around me is like that. And so I've just wanted to understand everything since I was a young kid. And it's just been fun that I keep getting better and better at it. And in particular, it's this electronic stuff and so forth. My wife does this with art, which is a little bit different and requires a slightly different set of skills, but there's no shortage of passion on her part. So it's a similar sort of thing. So I'm still pulling things out of the garbage, but now I can understand them. And now I get to explain them to other students who don't appreciate them quite at the level that I do. But they can still go off and get jobs, creating these things and understanding them. So it's a lot of fun.
That's great. That's great. So very briefly, you studied computer science. You went to Berkeley?
Yes. Yeah. Let's see. I was at Caltech for an undergrad, then went to Berkeley for a master's and a PhD. Worked briefly, joined Columbia in 2001, and been here ever since.
Okay. So our topic today is AI, and everyone's asking, everyone's thinking, and I love having these conversations partially because it helps, I'm thinking about it an awful lot with Robofun, and my current feeling about it is I want kids to learn about AI, not necessarily to use it within our classes, because I think they'll just be better users of AI if they really understand more. But that's becoming somewhat of a controversial position. And I do think it's ironic that in preparing for my interview with you, I thought about all the questions that I wanted to ask, and then I threw it into AI. And, and I felt, the thing for adults is it slightly often feels like a bit of a guilty pleasure or a guilty shortcut. And yet I feel as though I have the skills to go, yeah, okay, those are a few good ideas. I wouldn't have said it that way. And then I redo it. But if you're a child, you got to develop yourself more before you're ready to be able to have shortcuts is where I'm at this moment. But I'm curious where you're at and how you've gotten to where you're at.
Right. So you've probably used it more than I have, although it's really ironic. As a computer scientist or as a weirdo like I am, of course, what I want to know is how it works and how it's put together, as opposed to how I can use it.
Yep.
And so I'm probably more up on that than most people. But it's such a profoundly new tool that we sort of as a species haven't really figured out how to deal with it or something like that. So, I'm trying to think of similar examples in the past. And so calculators are an example, to an extent, right? There was a point where if you had to do arithmetic, you had to be able to, write numbers, or maybe you could do it in your head or something like that. And then suddenly you've got this machine that can do it perfectly 1,000 times faster than you or whatever. And, and I'm sure there was all sorts of hand wringing, and, there still is a little bit when
Right.
you're teaching arithmetic or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
But we've sort of learned how to cope with that as a society, where it's, of course it's a tool. And so I see a few more analogies, right? So it's a tool, but you've got to know how to use it. When you type stuff in, when it gives you an answer, should you trust the answer? Did you enter things properly? Did you understand the precedence order of the operations that it was using? Are those consistent? So there's a whole bunch of considerations like that, with calculators that you need to know about, and it's kind of useful to know some aspects of learning arithmetic, of how arithmetic works as well. But realistically, for most arithmetical problems people encounter, like doing tips or something like that, yeah, okay, use a calculator, no problem.
Right.
Now, AI is a little bit more complicated, a little more nuanced.
Complicated, yeah.
And well, let's see. I don't want to completely dominate this conversation, but I'll share some anecdotes that I think are somewhat illustrative. So I'm teaching a class where we're building little computer systems. And so nominally, you sort of had to put these things together yourself and write the code, and either, maybe you would go out and find a library, or maybe you'd go out and find something else that somebody had done, which would kind of work, and maybe you could glue that together or something like that. But that's usually pretty difficult. And it was clear, oh, you really had to do this and you had to do that. Suddenly, you can now go and type in a prompt, say, oh, give me a project that looks like this and this and this for whatever. And of course, the students are doing this because they're younger than I am and pick these things up.
Right.
And there's this interesting question: are they learning anything?
Right.
They're getting the final product, but they're not understanding what they have or how they got there. And when something goes wrong, they don't know. They don't know what to do.
Okay, so I didn't even set Stephen up to say this at all. But this is my concern. And I will give you two examples. I have a dear friend, Dr. Bakhtiar Mikak, who teaches at the Harvard Extension School. And recently on a trip, we had lunch in Boston, and he's like, oh my God, ownership. People don't feel like they own anything anymore because they threw it into AI, and they got insights. And I think that learning is so much about owning your ideas and developing your ideas. And that really worries me.
So it's interesting with my students, the ownership thing. So your point is an interesting one, but I don't think they could care less about ownership.
Now or before?
Well, now, and possibly before as well. But let me explain. Part of it is just that the assessment rules that we, higher education put up, are things like, can you do this on a test? Or with this, it's get a project working, and then give a presentation about it and write an article. They understand that I'm not grading them on their ownership of this or their feeling of ownership of this. They think they're purely graded on what's the quality of the thing they can deliver at the end. And to an extent, we as educators may be cheating a little bit by that. I would turn it around and say, you learn when you feel ownership of the things that you're working on.
Right.
And it pushes you to learn more.
Right. Yep.
And so I would imagine, well, you described for yourself, you typed in a few things, saw what AI said about this, and said, oh, okay, I agree with this, I don't agree with that, or whatever. Of course, that's the kind of stuff. It's, oh, give me some ideas and let me sift through them or whatever, and do that. And these students don't even bother with that. It's like, oh yeah, that looks okay, let's turn it in.
Right.
And what do you learn from that? oh, which AI costs least to use or will produce the output and the result you want or something like that. That's not especially useful.
Right. So that brings me to two questions, which it seems like it attacks our method of evaluating students' proficiency,
Yeah.
which I've always felt like is a problem because it's not.
It's always a challenge. I mean, it is a big chunk of what we in higher education do. In the case of Robofun, it's different, right? You're not passing out grades. You're not. It's something completely different. And at that point, in an environment like that, 100%, it's how can you get the kids fired up about figuring out the things that we want them to figure out.
Right. Right.
And how can you fan those flames and so forth. That's really tricky. Part of what we do in higher education is encourage people to follow this path, hit these goalposts, hit these milestones,
right,
with the hope that the side effect is along the way. Oh, you see that? Oh, you see how that works? Oh, right. Okay. Oh, that's really useful. I see that. And then maybe at the end you see how all the bits and pieces fit together. But when you're let's see, when you're a jaded, overworked college student, you don't always see sort of why we're going in that direction or why we're doing any of that.
Right. Right. So do you feel like you're graduating kids who figured out how to get the results but don't understand what they've done? And how do you feel about that?
I'm deeply concerned that we're going to be graduating all of those folks, right? 3 years ago, we would not be having this conversation.
Yep.
2 years ago, it'd be, oh yeah, this is kind of interesting. It seems to be, it hit like a ton of bricks this semester. And it's really clear. I can see, I've been spending much too much time interacting with students, and it's really clear the ones who are going to the effort of trying to understand things themselves, and maybe asking AI for help or explanation, or can you find me this, or how would I do that, or whatever, versus the ones who say, oh, that seems to produce the thing that was being asked for. Send it, ship it.
Right.
And this is just, night and day different.
So to flip the argument a different way, there's an awful lot of things that AI can do to make our lives, or in education, that can help us help kids with higher order thinking skills. Versus, I happen to have a dyslexic son who learning the times tables it didn't work in his head. And I talked to different math people, and they're like, "Yeah, that's not going to work." But he's very mathematical, and he, can do the Rubik's, all these other things. So I don't have an answer at all to this, but I have a feeling that that's the way we want to use AI, is to not have us do grunt work in a way.
That's the hope. And, it's going back to my calculator analogy, that's sort of exactly it, right? It's, practically, who cares what 72 times 53 is?
Right.
Not too important. Maybe it's an important thing, but often the process doesn't matter. You just care about the result. Now, if instead you're thinking about, okay, well, how do I build a computer that can calculate that? What's the most efficient way? How do I implement an algorithm for doing that? What's the implication of changing these things? All the rest of it. Much, much deeper than just, give me the answer. Now, and those are the interesting things that we really want people to pick up. The challenge has always been that the things we really want them to learn are things that are incredibly hard to articulate or convey directly. It's more like, okay, if you jump through these hoops, you will start to see the pattern that we actually want to, imprint on you.
Right.
Instead of just standing up and saying, here's the pattern, memorize it. This doesn't.
Or here's the pattern, and this system will give it to you, versus, why is this a pattern? How did we develop this pattern? I think a lot of it comes down to curiosity and grit.
Hmm.
I feel as though we've become much more of a transactional society. Like, what do we want and how do we get an answer? Versus, it's uncomfortable to grapple with what we don't know and to try to figure out a solution. And it doesn't happen in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it often doesn't. At the same time, I'm thinking, go 200 years, 300 years in the past. The things we can understand these days, I'm thinking, biology, mathematics, all the rest of it. It's breathtaking. It's absolutely crazy. And so in some sense, there's so much more available than there ever used to be. On the other hand, that just makes it all the more overwhelming.
Right. Well, I go back to the fact that like scaffolding.
Yeah.
I have eyeglasses.
Mhm.
I probably would have died from pneumonia at 17 years old. And those are like life. Scaffolding isn't quite the right word, but we don't
Right.
kill our own chickens. We don't make our silverware. We all, we work on top of things.
Right.
And so that brings up the question of scaffolding in education, which is a really important thing.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and I really like that analogy of scaffolding. For example, it was funny. I had a foreign visitor asking, why are these sheds over so many of the sidewalks? And I explained, it's because they're repairing it. There's a law and so forth. But imagine if they didn't put up that scaffolding when they were doing the repairs, or whether they were being asked to climb the building without scaffolding or something like that. Now,
Right.
You might be able to do that, but it's not safe, and there are much easier ways to do it. And with that one, it really is, we just want you up at a certain place to be able to do stuff. I don't really care how you got there.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing is somewhat with learning. I think of it also as sort of applying academic friction, right? What do you just give the students to do,
Right.
Or to use, versus what do you want them to expend some effort trying to figure out how it works or whatever, right? I assume you do not give ABS plastic beads to your students and say, please go extrude, and then let's go and play with the Legos that come back. No, you give them the pre-built Legos.
Yeah, exactly.
No arguments, right?
Right.
And you're not expecting them to know about polymers and all this other stuff that gets you to that level. And this is true throughout modern life, right?
Right. But here's an example of a scaffolding that, there's a child who is terribly ADHD and never can find his pencil. So do you want to make that an issue, or do you want to always have, about 10 pencils in his backpack so that whenever he wants to get ready, he has it?
Yeah. And so that's an interesting question. And well, that gets even more complicated, which is, obviously you'd like to get this student to the point where
Sure.
he has the pencils, and that raises all kinds of questions about, well, okay, does he really have the brain plasticity to change his habits enough to get to that point? And if you did that, so that's pretty complicated.
Right. But I think it's also a stepped answer. Like, maybe we want to get him more or her more empowered as a human being and see his or her successes without letting it hinge upon searching for a pencil every time. And maybe when that happens, then we go back to the pencil.
Right. No, absolutely. And, I think about that, all the time as well. Should I be grading my students on how poorly they didn't learn the stuff in the classes they took long before they met me? Right. When I'm teaching them, digital electronics, do I grade them down for using poor grammar or spelling? Right. Sort of, that's not really the focus of what we're worrying about here.
However, they are getting a bachelor's from Columbia University.
Yeah, that's a more complicated thing. But anyway,
Master's.
But I agree. And so maybe that's an example of it, right? if the if the goal is, learn how to write clearly, express, arguments and prose and so forth, having AI, please give me an essay on Shakespeare, that's not appropriate. That's
Sure, sure,
passing
sure, sure,
somebody
sure.
else's work off as your own, or
Right.
it's it.
I,
Oh, the other analogy I came up with was when searching, we think of it as Google searching or whatever, but finding stuff on the web
right,
emerged, and
right.
okay, we're both old enough to remember when that happened. Um, at what point is that cheating versus doing your own research or whatever? And it's just, yeah, okay, there's some skills that disappeared. I used to be able to read Library of Congress catalog numbers and things like that. I've since forgotten, and nobody cares. So in some sense, it's like, well, what do you figure this out, or do you go and find a book that tells you how it works? And there's scenarios where that's appropriate and where it isn't.
What I'm beginning to think is that it's media literacy, not 101, but the 400 level, and that if you hear sounds in the background, I'm not sure, we have a whole bunch of staff members learning how to use my current favorite robot, this one, to use in schools. But that's going on in the background at the Robofun studio. But my point here about, I lost my train of thought. I was talking about, yeah, okay, got it back. That this is like media literacy. I don't want kids to just jump into it without having some tools and some language. What's a large language model? Mm-hmm. Why are large language models, can they be discriminatory? How do we, and so I feel as though my job as an educator of 3 to 16-year-olds is about the tools.
Yeah, well, and honestly, that doesn't change. It terrifies me that I'm still giving students guidance on what to search on Google. Oh, what should I look up now, and so forth. And it's funny. At one point, I thought, oh, that's not very important, or most people. But no, that's actually a really important skill.
Well, you've just given us another class to teach.
Yeah.
Class. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's that, and there's no question about you need a similar level of, how do you use AI? When should you be skeptical of it? What is it good for? What should you be really cautious about? When are you being tricked by it? Really high level societal things, right? Is it biased? Is it racist? Why would it be that? Why is that a bad thing?
And who's created it up till now?
Right.
And the tools.
There's all kinds of questions also about, geez, how did that come about? And, geez, so the number of questions and issues that arises goes so much farther than, oh, wait, is it memory bound or compute bound? I mean, these, of course, the sorts of things I think about.
Right. Well, as usual, we could go on, but I think we've really had a good conversation. I mean, there's 2 things that stick in my mind about this conversation, amongst many others. One is, what's your goal? And when you're considering using AI, you got to think about what your goal is. Actually, 3 things.
Oh, absolutely. And it seems to me like, and I don't have a good answer for all of this, but it's something like, I'd love to be able to say, okay, here's a set of rules, or here's a model to think about when it's appropriate to use AI and when it isn't, and whether it's okay and whether it isn't, and what you should expect about it, and so forth. We're going to have to come up with that someday. We don't have that now.
Sure. So, I mean, I think the 3 things that come to mind to me are, what is your goal? How do we have literate kids who know the tools? Mm-hmm. And conversations about scaffolding. Because I do think there's times that AI could be a tutor or a support, but I think you have to go into that with your eyes open. And as educators, both of us need to know how. or
Hmm.
need to, and how are we going to learn? We're actually probably going to ask our kids, our students a lot, how are you using it? How are you? And then we can look at it.
Yeah, well, and certainly to a large extent, that's what's happening now. It's like,
Right,
oh, where do I learn about this latest AI website or whatever that I need to go to? Well, I
right,
just look for a youngster and say, oh, whatever. But I'm hoping that our wisdom can help us understand a little bit more about, oh yeah, that's not a good idea for this and this reason, or
right,
oh, that would be a perfect thing.
right,
Right. The AI tutor stuff, you know, hey, AI, teach me how to do XYZ. That sounds pretty good to me. That seems like a reasonable use of it. But then you also have to worry about, well, is it teaching me nonsense? Why should I trust the things that it's saying? And should I, think critically about this? And this is true of any time you ask somebody to teach you something.
sure, good,
Um,
very good point. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But
So,
it's making judgments like that.
yes. So once again, Stephen, thank you so much for your time. Um, and we will probably,
It's always a joy, Laura.
oh, thank you. Thank you. And for those in the audience, we have an open house this Sunday, May 3rd, 2026, because a lot of this content is evergreen, but the open house is not particularly evergreen. Um, and for those of you, we will have some summer discounts on that day. And you'll learn all about what happens at summer camp at Robofun with both robotics, coding, uh, also engineering with Minecraft and circuitry, as well as stop motion animation. We work with 3 to 13-year-olds. We also work in schools with high school kids. So that's what Robofun's about, and really helping kids love to learn. And my conversations with Stephen always help me think about these things more deeply. So thank you again, and we'll be in touch.
Very good. Yep, absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.